The third theme of wisdom is that wisdom is action-oriented. It means you actually have to do something. Wisdom isn't knowing the right thing, it's doing it. Now, in order to act effectively, we need to understand how power works, because the only way to do something is to exercise your power to make it happen. So, what is power? Well, you can think of power as this network of relationships throughout society. So we have society, there's millions and millions of people in it, and there's this web of relationships between everyone. And within this web of relationships, there's hierarchies, there's authorities. It's kind of established who can do what, when can they do it, how can they do it, and so on, right? So we have this web of relations that defines and determines who can do what and when and how, right? Now, we often think of power negatively. We're kind of afraid of power oftentimes because we're afraid of the power somebody has over us. They're going to make us do something we don't want to do, right? But I want to readjust our thinking of power. I want us to think of power as something positive. It is a creative force because it is through power that we create societies. It's through power that we create civilization. We use power to create hospitals and schools. We use power to solve, the homeless problem and to cure addictions and to cure disease and to send people to the moon. So power is a creative force, okay? It is how we organize and structure our society, our organizations, and our social systems. So, what does a wise leader need to know about power? Well, in this course, we walk through a couple of different ways to conceptualize power. The first way that we discuss, that you'll see in the assigned reading, is the dimensions of power, right? So there's different dimensions that power can take. So the first dimensional power is exhibited when different groups are in conflict with one another. They're in open conflict. Each group wants something different, and they're just going toe-to-toe and fighting over who wins, who gets what, right? Second dimensional power, you still have different groups that oppose each other. However, with second dimensional power, one group is able to suppress the conflict. They're able to prevent the conflict from happening, not necessarily by getting the other group to agree with you, but by just taking certain actions that kind of quell or prevent the group from even being able to fight you, right? So second dimensional power is this ability to suppress conflict. Third dimensional power is the ability to avoid conflict altogether by influencing and shaping people's preferences. If you can change what people want, you can avoid the need for conflict altogether because you just make them want what you want, right? So that's third dimensional power. Fourth dimensional power is this network. It sort of explores this network of relations within society. It sort of explores how do we create societies, how do we create individuals within societies, like big, heady, big question kind of stuff, okay? That's fourth dimensional power. Now, we also look at another conceptualization of power. We look at the faces of power. Now, this is similar to dimensions of power, but there's some differences as well. There's overlap, but there's differences. So one of the faces of power is what we call episodic power. So episodic means like there's an episode. It's something we do, not all the time, but on occasion. So we're all going about minding our own business, then somebody does something. Okay, so episodic power is somebody doing something to make something happen, right? And we have two types there. We have coercion and we have manipulation. So coercion is where somebody, compels somebody else to do something. Manipulation is where somebody, sort of manipulates somebody to do something. Now, these words sound really negative. Like it sounds like you're just trying to force people, or it sounds like you're trying to trick them. And certainly that happens. Sure, that happens all the time, but that's not the only way that we can coerce, manipulate people. We can manipulate people by tricking them, but presenting a persuasive argument is also a way of manipulating people. I'm trying to manipulate you right now by giving you a persuasive argument, by giving you information. So coercion and manipulation could be negative, but they don't have to be negative. They could be positive ways, or just the ways that humans interact to make things happen, right? So those are examples of episodic power. The other face of power is systematic power. So this relates to the fourth dimension of power earlier, where we sort of explore how do we create societies and social systems. So we have this idea of domination, which again sounds bad, but it looks at how do we take on the values and the belief systems of the society that we're in. How do we socialize people into our culture, right? Subjectification looks at questions of how do we create people who fill roles? How do people take on roles in society? How do they assume identities within a society or within a culture? So that's subjectification. So those are the two faces of power. Because this is a course that focuses on business and organizations, we also need to look at the sites of power. So you can have power operating inside of an organization. That can be one of the sites where you see power operating, is inside of an organization where one group vies against another group to make something happen, right? So those are groups within the organization, hustling and jiving, trying to make something happen within their organization. You could also see power through organization. So that's where the leaders of an organization or influential people in an organization try to use the resources of the organization to have an impact on the outside world. Okay, that's power through the organization. You can have power against an organization. That's where an outside group seeks to stop or to modify the behavior of the organization. So a group might try to get a business to stop a certain action. It might try to change certain actions of the business or certain business practices or so on. So that's outside groups operating against, trying to prevent or stop an organization. And then you can also have power over an organization. This is again where influential people seek to find ways to control the resources of an organization. So they want to get power over the organization so that they can control and manipulate and operate the organization. Okay. Beyond all that, we're also going to get down in the trenches and figure out how do people actually use power? Like what does it actually look like in a day-to-day basis? Like what do people actually do when they're exercising power? So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at two different faces of that, or two different facets of that. We're going to look at power relations. So how do people create or maintain or modify the relations between different groups and individuals with power? And then we'll also look at this relationship between power and rationality. Right? Because if you can influence what people think is the rational thing to do, you can influence the behaviors of those people. So there's a very tight correlation between power and rationality. And so we're going to explore how do people do that in an organizational context. So we got a lot of neat things to discuss, so why don't we actually get into it? I will look forward to seeing you in future classes and future workshops.